Today, I want to talk about how most of our relationship problems come from cognitive distortions, meaning thinking errors, and that becoming aware of our thoughts can literally transform our relationships for the better. And by relationship, I mean any relationship we have, whether it's with our kids, our spouse, friends, family, and especially the relationship you have with yourself. Hi, it's Anna here. Welcome back to my channel, the best place for parents or educators who want to learn and evolve with their children. As you know, in the last year, I've read a lot of books, and I've been particularly fascinated with neuroscience. And I feel so lucky that we have so much research readily available and explained to us in layman terms so we can actually benefit from it. It's a subject I'm specifically interested in because understanding how our mind works has really transformed my relationships for the better. And that goes for the relationship I have with my 3 children, my partner, my mother-in-law, and my extended family. What I've come to realize is that a huge part of my relationship problems came from a thinking error. And the scientific term for that is cognitive distortion. In a nutshell, it's the fact that we all tend to perceive meaning that simply isn't there because our brain likes to take shortcuts. A very simple example is when people say, "I'm not good at math." Or in my case, I used to always say, "I'm not creative," based on a few people who always used to make fun of me because I couldn't draw the simplest stick figure. And I'll provide a lot more examples in this video. And the saddest part is that most of us do it completely unconsciously. So the simple fact of becoming aware of it, becoming aware of our thoughts from an observer standpoint, and getting curious with it to try to understand what's going on, can really minimize the conflicts that we have with everyone around us, and can be the simple step you need to really transform your relationships. First, I will define what cognitive distortions are and why we do it. Then I will discuss examples of the different types of cognitive distortions, and then I will explain what you can do instead. So let's start with defining what cognitive distortions are. In a nutshell, it is a faulty way of thinking that twists reality. It's basically our mind convincing us of something that really isn't there. It's thought patterns that cause us to view reality in inaccurate and usually negative ways. We tend to trust what goes on in our brain, and generally speaking, our brain is doing a fantastic job. It is wired to pay attention to the negative because its main job is to keep us safe. So it is keeping us alert to danger and finding solutions to our problems. However, it also likes to take shortcuts to automate its process so that we are quicker to respond and to make decisions. And what we understand from neuroscience and neuroplasticity that I already covered in this video is that any repeated behavior creates neural pathways in our brain. And the more you repeat it, the stronger that connection. So like a computer, it's doing its job with no judgment, and you may have developed some faulty or unhelpful connections over time. And I know that I certainly did. I mean, our brain is predisposed to make connections with anything, thoughts, ideas, consequences, circumstances, whether they are truly connected or not. And usually this happens completely unconsciously. So you can see how it can be very easy to create faulty connections in our brain. Personally, I do believe that cognitive distortions affect all of us to some extent. I mean, this is a society we live in, a very judgmental society where everything is based on being good or bad from the time that we are a little child. So it makes sense that we are so wired to negative thinking and judgmental thinking. But when we are out of balance with our negative thinking, it can really affect our relationships. It keeps us stuck, unable to find solutions, and very often it's actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because, for example, if you expect someone to be defensive about something that you want to say, you will likely be more aggressive. And over time, these cognitive distortions can lead to anxiety and depression. And here is how it's all connected and how it's affecting us in our day-to-day life. Our mind and body are actually linked, so repeated negative thoughts affect our feelings, which will then affect how we act. So for example, if you are having issues with your child and their homework, your first thought might be, "My child will never succeed in life," which then leads to feelings of being frustrated, angry, demoralized. The physical sensation you may be feeling are, getting hot, shortness of breath, sweaty palms. And then what's your behavior? You end up yelling at your child. It's all connected, and it all started from a thinking error about your child's homework because you've made a prediction about the future based on one small event that cannot possibly predict your child's future. And if you become really curious about your feelings every day, you will start to make a connection about your thoughts and feelings. And you will start to realize that a lot of the conflicts that you have in your relationships are connected to how you are thinking. So now I wanted to discuss some types of cognitive distortions and give you a specific example so you really understand what I mean. The first one is called black and white thinking, and it's also known as all or nothing thinking or polarized thinking. And as the name suggests, it's when we see the world in black and white instead of seeing it as it is, complex, nuanced, and full of all shades of gray. It's when you place people or situations in an either-or category, with no middle ground, when in truth things are never that simple. And I do believe that this black and white thinking affects us in a lot of our relationships, and especially in our parenting our kids. So some example of this is when you get frustrated because you are doing everything right that the parenting experts are telling you to do, and nothing seems to be working with your child. Instead of realizing that each child is unique and there isn't a one-size-fits-all with parenting. Sometimes the last thing that your child needs is to acknowledge their feelings. And that's why it's so important to be attuned to your child in each scenario. And I will actually do another video on this so you can understand this concept a bit more. Another example is when you hear that connection is everything for your children, but then you can't reconcile that with also needing to have boundaries with them. Another type of cognitive distortion is overgeneralization. This is taking one negative event or detail about a situation and making a general conclusion. For example, after interviewing for a job and not getting it, we overgeneralize by thinking we'll never get a job, and as a result, we feel hopeless. This is also why I absolutely despise any parenting book that romanticize another culture's parenting. There are so many books about French parents, and I am French myself, so I've been approached so many times by other people telling me that, oh, you guys in France do it so well. No, it's not true at all. The French parents also struggle, also have the same problems. And also, because I'm from France, I can say that in France, there's a huge culture of kids being seen but not heard. And is that really what you want for your child? Another type of cognitive distortion is called mental filtering. It's similar to overgeneralization, and it's when you focus on a single negative piece of information and exclude all the positive ones. So for example, it's when you dwell on a single negative comment that your partner made and you decide that the relationship is doomed and you need to separate. Another one is called catastrophizing, taking a problem or something negative and completely blowing it out of proportion. And I think we tend to do this a lot as parents when we worry because our 2-year-old is not sharing their toy and we think they're going to grow up to be antisocial. Or when our child is shy and we really try to push them hard to stop being so shy so that they, again, don't grow up to be antisocial. And this can also go the other way with minimizing, which is taking something positive that happened and minimizing it so that it doesn't count as a good thing in your life or experience. It's when you take being humble to another level by thinking that you only got the promotion because you got lucky. Or someone telling you they love spending time with you and you thinking that they are just saying that to be nice and they don't really mean it. Another huge one is called mind reading. This one is so rife in personal relationships, and I've been guilty of that one very badly. It's when you assume that you know and understand what another person is thinking and feeling. I actually have a great example of mind reading to share with you that happened recently with my partner. We were at breakfast and I had a day off with no kids, and he just said, "What are your plans for the day?" And straight away I felt myself tense and I responded, "Well, I have work to do." I really felt judged that, I didn't have actually work to do and that he was judging me for it. And then later on during the day, I just realized that, hang on a second, I need to clarify what he actually meant because I was still annoyed by it. So I clarified with him and he just said, "Oh, I wanted to know because I really wanted to have lunch together." And I know that this happens all the time in relationships where there are just so many misunderstandings based on assumptions that we make about what the other person actually means. And another example of this, and I know that so many women do this, is when we don't take self-care for ourselves and we actually blame our partner for it because we think that they should know that we are tired. They should make the time for us. And it's completely unfair to put that responsibility on the other person. They are not mind readers. So my relationship with my partner completely changed when I actually took ownership of my self-care, and I actually scheduled every Saturday morning to have 2 hours to myself. It's in the calendar. He knows he has to take care of the 3 kids, and that's it. No arguments about it. And it's so hard to do for a lot of us because we have been conditioned to think that way. Another type of cognitive distortion is should statements. And I know that everyone is affected by this. It's when you think things like, I should exercise, I should be more patient with the kids, he should realize that I'm tired. And here's the paradox. Attempting to motivate ourselves in this way can actually lead to procrastination and apathy. It has the complete opposite effect. So usually when you are feeling frustrated, it's because you are directing should statements to others. And when you have feelings of guilt, shame, or self-loathing, it's because you are directing should statements to yourself. Another type of cognitive distortion is labeling and mislabeling, which is basically negative self-talk. When you think things like, I'm such an idiot when you drop something on the floor, or I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm hopeless. And the last one that I have on the list, although there are a lot more, but I just wanted to focus on the main ones, is personalization and blame, which is when you arbitrarily conclude that what happened was your fault or reflects your inadequacy, even when you were not responsible for it. And in my opinion, it's what leads to a lot of unnecessary guilt for a lot of people. So for example, it's when you feel like a failure as a parent because your child suffers from anxiety, when you couldn't possibly prevent your child from all sufferings from life. So as you can see with these cognitive distortions, I'm sure you will be able to reference some examples that you've encountered in your own life with your own relationships. And I think we are all guilty of doing this because, like I said, this is how we have been conditioned to think as a society. So, as mentioned before, one of our brain's main job is to keep us safe. So these cognitive distortions actually serve a purpose. They are there to protect us from uncertainty and disappointment. So basically, it's a coping mechanism that we've adopted to keep us comfortable and in control. Now, there are two important things to realize. The first one is that this process takes time. You probably have years of neural pathways to undo in your brain because of the repeated negative thinking that you've had. So you need to allow time to undo all of that, to create more neutral, rational, and balanced thinking in your brain. And the second thing is that this requires to become comfortable with being vulnerable, because you will need to become aware of your thoughts and your emotions. And typically, if we haven't practiced this forever, it's very uncomfortable the first times to do that, to be in touch with our emotion and understand what's going on. We haven't been parented and we haven't been raised that way. And you don't need to do anything major. I actually really believe that sustainable change comes from small steps repeated every day. That's what will lead to big transformations in your relationships and ultimately will lead to you being happier. So the first step is to become an observer of your thoughts and emotions. And at the beginning, you won't be able to do it in the moment. You won't be able to stop yourself from reacting. So I strongly suggest that you take the time to reflect on the day's events at the end of each day. And I'm personally a big fan of writing them down in a journal, but you can also think of them in your head or talk about it with a friend, for example. And reflection is such a huge piece of the puzzle because it's what leads to mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and social intelligence. And I invite you to ask yourself these questions every time. How were you feeling at that time? What thoughts were going through your mind at the time? And don't hesitate to dig deeper because very often the first thing that comes to mind are surface level emotions and thoughts. So we always need to dig deeper and take time to really think about it. And then challenge those thoughts. Are they actually true? Do you have evidence for this? And think about how you want to show up instead. Here, it really helps to know your core personal values so you know what you stand for and which direction you want to take next time. And basically practice reframing these thoughts with more positive and helpful thoughts. I actually have an example that I want to share with you so you can see how this process can really help. So I was having a discussion with a friend recently, and she told me that she was really frustrated with her 7-year-old and how he was doing his homework. He was actually still doing the homework, but she didn't like the way he was doing it. He was moving around, sitting on the floor, laying on the floor, and she felt like he wasn't really serious about it and he wasn't doing it right. And I asked her how she felt about it, and she told me that it was probably her perfectionism tendencies that were affecting this. And I asked again, I said, but think about it, like what are your thoughts? Like how are you feeling? And then she sat with it for 5 minutes and she realized that she actually had a lot of guilt from last year during COVID when she couldn't do any home learning with her 7-year-old because she had a full-time job. And basically she didn't do any homework or any home learning last year. And she felt like she was feeling very guilty and scared that he was falling behind. And based on this epiphany, then the next step was, okay, well, then she can talk to the teacher and actually ask if he's falling behind. So this example is just to show you that when she challenged her initial thoughts and she actually realized what she was thinking and what was driving her behavior with her child, because they were actually arguing as a result, she understood what was going on inside, and then it allowed her to address the need that she had about making sure that her child is not falling behind. And once you get to that point, then you can find a healthier way to address it. So instead of yelling at your child, she can talk to the teacher and see if it's even an issue, because maybe it's not. And if the teacher says he's not falling behind at all, he's top of the class, which I actually think he is, then she can just relax and not care about how he does his homework. He's probably one of the child who actually doesn't even need to do his homework. The second step that I want to mention, and that is a huge piece of the puzzle, is compassion. Self-blame and self-criticism do not lead to any positive change. So a huge part of this exercise is to make sure that you approach your own thoughts or another person's reactions with a lot of compassion. Because once you can sit with compassion, it opens up to so much more solutions. And one exercise that I'd like you to do is to pay close attention to your inner self-talk. How do you actually talk to yourself? And really notice the self-criticism and self-blame and try to reframe those thoughts. And the way I like to do this is by thinking, how would I talk to my best friend? Very often, we talk to ourselves in a way that we would never dare talking to anyone like this. And the third step of this exercise is that I'd like to invite you to make it a habit of looking the good in people around you, whether it's your spouse, your kids, or yourself. Because the more you look for the good, the more you will notice it. So really pay close attention to it, notice it, catch them doing something good, and tell them about it. And if you need help with how to communicate more clearly with your spouse, for example, and with less judgment, I really recommend you watch this video. Nonviolent communication is an amazing framework that has completely transformed my relationship with my partner. I highly recommend it. Ultimately, you need to train yourself to be able to see things in all shades of gray and try to see things more positively. And for any arguments, as a rule of thumb, the truth is usually always somewhere in the middle. That's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave me a like and please leave me a comment and let me know how you go with this exercise, or give me examples of how you are struggling in your relationships. I'd love to know. Thanks for watching and keep growing.